Romance of Sui and Tang Dynasties Chapter 99.
I want you to imagine, just for a moment, an absolutely impossible moral dilemma.
Okay.
Picture this. You are the ultimate authority in the land.
Right. You've got all the power.
Exactly. You hold the power of life and death. And right now, you're tasked with deciding the fate of a group of undeniable traitors. People who actively sold out your country.
Not a great position to be in.
No, it's not. The law dictates they must die. Your political advisors, they insist they must die, but there is this massive world-altering complication.
There always is.
Right. What if the traitors standing before you, the ones waiting for the executioner's blade, what if they are the children of the very person who secretly saved your life before you were even born?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Do you honor that ultimate personal debt, or do you execute the law?
It's the kind of scenario that forces a total collision between everything we value about human gratitude and everything we require from blind justice.
It really is.
And what makes it so compelling is that it strips away any easy answers. I mean, you are forced to choose what kind of society you actually want to live in.
And that is the exact scenario we're exploring in today.
I'm really looking forward to this one.
It's a wild ride, this fascinating web of ancient political intrigue.
It's quite the web.
We're going to navigate through palace paranoia, actual supernatural interventions, and, like you said, this profound collision between deep personal debt and the cold, hard rule of law.
What's fascinating here is how the text immediately sets up a core philosophical framework for us to view this entire dilemma.
Yeah, lay that out for us.
So, in this ancient context, the prevailing philosophy dictates that loyalty to the state and filial piety, which is, your supreme duty to your family, they are not separate concepts. They are fundamentally identical. The text explicitly argues that a traitor to the country is naturally a thief to their own family.
And vice versa, right?
Exactly. An unfilial person is inherently disloyal to the state.
That is a really heavy concept to wrap our modern minds around. Just the idea that if you would betray your emperor, you would automatically betray your own father.
It rests on this belief that the state is essentially the family structure written large.
Like the emperor is the father of the nation.
Precisely. They believe that preserving your body and honoring your parents is paramount, but serving your ruler requires you to be willing to lay down your life.
Which kind of seems like a contradiction on the surface.
It does. However, the text argues the underlying principle is exactly the same. It's submission to the ultimate authority.
Okay, I see.
So if you are a rebel, you are automatically a terrible son because you have disgraced the family name and broken the social contract your ancestors built.
And in this deep dive, we are going to see that exact philosophy put to the ultimate agonizing test.
We really are.
So let's set the scene for how we actually arrive at this impossible choice.
Good idea.
The Great Rebellion has just been broken. Emperor Xizong has finally returned to the western capital, Cheng'an, and this is after he literally had to flee for his life.
Right. Things were incredibly unstable.
And the immediate glaring problem sitting on his desk is deciding what to do with the government officials who did not flee with him.
The ones left behind.
Exactly. He has to pass judgment on the ones who stayed and surrendered to the rebels instead of, well, fighting to the death for the empire.
You can imagine the toxic atmosphere in the capital at this point.
Oh, it must have been awful.
The returning loyalists, the ones who suffered through the exile and the war, they are demanding blood. The immediate reaction from the victorious court is just to execute every single one of them for treason.
Just a blanket wipeout.
Yeah. But then we get this incredibly pragmatic, sobering advice from a minister named Li Xian.
Right, he steps in.
He steps up and points out a very uncomfortable reality about the start of the rebellion. The former emperor, Shang Wang, who was ruling when the violence broke out, he fled the capital in an absolute panic.
It was a total mess.
It was a chaotic, uncoordinated retreat, and he left almost everyone behind to fend for themselves.
And it ignores the physical reality on the ground. These officials woke up to find the emperor had just vanished.
Gone.
The royal guard was gone, and an invading army was literally standing at the city gates.
Yeah.
It wasn't a calculated, willing surrender for most of these people. It was just basic survival.
And Li Xian argues that treating these abandoned officials exactly the same as a military general who willingly defected to the enemy that violates the fundamental principles of benevolence.
Makes sense.
But he doesn't just appeal to morality. He brings in a masterful geopolitical strategy.
I love this part.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, executing every single person who surrendered in China would send a terrifying counterproductive message to the rest of the country.
Because there are still officials out there.
Exactly. There are still countless state officials trapped in the rebel-held territory of Hebei.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, if the officials still stuck in Hebei hear that surrendering to survive means an automatic death sentence the moment the empire reclaims the territory,
Right.
then they have absolutely zero incentive to ever lay down their arms and rejoin the empire.
They would realize the imperial state is going to kill them anyway.
So their most rational choice is just to fight to the bitter end alongside the rebels.
Exactly. Executing everyone in the capital would effectively harden the resolve of the remaining regal territories and just prolong the war indefinitely. Like Xi'an is pleading for a strategy of reintegration over a strategy of pure vengeance.
And Emperor Sezong listens to this logic. He understands the political reality, and he agrees to a compromise.
A very harsh compromise, though.
Oh, incredibly brutal. Instead of a blanket death penalty, the court divides the punishments into 6 different tiers, scaled to the severity of the treason.
Right.
The text details that 18 men, including a high-ranking official named Daxi's son, are sentenced to public beheading.
And their families aren't spared the fallout either.
No, their families' properties are entirely confiscated by the state. Another 7 men, including Chen Zili, are granted what passed for mercy in those days.
Which is not much.
They're ordered to commit suicide rather than face the indignity of the executioner.
Just a grim time.
And the rest of the officials face varying degrees of exile, severe demotion, or physical beatings.
The machinery of state justice is just grinding forward. The law is being reestablished to prove that the empire is back in control.
And that machinery is swift, severe, and utterly impersonal.
Until it hits a snag?
Right. Those massive gears suddenly grind to a halt. Emperor Sezong is reviewing this list of condemned men, and he pauses.
He sees something.
He wants to grant a special, unprecedented pardon to 2 specific traitors.
Out of all those people.
Just these 2. Their names are Zhang Jun and Zhang Tuzi. They're the sons of the late prime minister, a man named Zhang Yu.
Now, overriding the treason laws for these 2 specific men isn't just a casual administrative favor.
No, it's a massive risk.
It risks undermining the entire foundation of the newly restored imperial authority. It invites accusations of favoritism at a time when the state desperately needs to project impartial strength.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why these 2 men? To understand this, we have to transport you back in time, decades before this rebellion.
Back to the old palace.
Exactly, to a period of intense palace intrigue. We're going back to when Sezong's father, Shang Huang, wasn't the retired emperor and wasn't even the ruling emperor yet.
He was just the crown prince.
Right. Let's pause and map this out for a second to understand the power dynamics. You have the ruling emperor at the time, Rizong.
Got it.
Below him is his son, the crown prince, who will later become Shang Huang. But hovering over both of them is Emperor Rizong's sister,
Princess Taiping.
the terrifyingly powerful Princess Taiping.
Terrifying is the right word. Being the crown prince under those specific conditions was a position of constant waking paranoia.
Oh, absolutely.
Princess Taiping wielded immense influence over the emperor, and she viewed the crown prince as a direct threat to her own consolidation of power.
She is constantly spying on him. She has informants planted everywhere in the Eastern Palace where the Crown Prince lives.
Nowhere is safe.
Every minor flaw, every single misstep the Crown Prince makes, Princess Taiping immediately reports it to the ruling Emperor Rizong. She's actively campaigning to get the Crown Prince deposed.
It's a psychological pressure cooker. The
Well-
crown prince is walking on eggshells every single day,
Knowing one wrong move could mean losing the throne.
and almost certainly losing his life.
Yeah. And right in the middle of this high-stakes survival game, a deeply personal crisis hits.
The worst possible timing.
The Crown Prince's concubine, Consort Yang, gets pregnant.
Now, in almost any other royal context, an heir to the throne having a child would be cause for massive celebration.
Right, it secures the bloodline.
Exactly. But for this crown prince, it brings absolute dread.
Because of Taiping.
He knows exactly how Princess Taiping will weaponize this pregnancy. She will go to the emperor and argue that the crown prince is indulging in women and worldly pleasures instead of focusing on his state duties.
He is convinced this unborn child will be the final piece of ammunition Princess Taiping needs to destroy him completely.
The political reality overrides any paternal instinct.
So he decides, in absolute secrecy, that he must abort the baby.
But a crown prince can't just walk down to the royal pharmacy and ask for an abortion potion.
No, he needs someone he can trust with his life. Someone who won't immediately sell this explosive secret to Princess Taiping.
So he pulls in his most trusted advisor, the man who serves as his royal lecturer.
And that man is Zhang Yu, the father of the two traders we mentioned earlier.
Yes. The crown prince begs Zhang Yu to secretly procure abortion medicine for Consort Yang.
And this command places Zhang Yu in an unbelievable moral and political dilemma.
It really does. On one hand, Zhang Yu firmly believes in the sanctity of the imperial bloodline.
The dragon seed.
Exactly. Royal blood that has a divine right to exist and absolutely should not be harmed by human hands.
But on the other hand,
he cannot openly defy the direct orders of a panicked, desperate crown prince.
right, if he argues too forcefully, he might lose his own head for insubordination.
Or the prince might just bypass him and find someone far less scrupulous to do the job.
So Zhang Yu makes a staggering decision. He decides to play medical roulette.
It's so risky.
He goes home and he prepares two different, completely unmarked doses of medicine.
Okay.
One of them is, in fact, a powerful abortion drug, but the other is an anti-miscarriage drug.
A potion designed to actively strengthen and protect the pregnancy?
Right. So he smuggles these two identical-looking doses into the heavily monitored palace, hands them to the crown prince, and lies.
He tells the prince that both of these are abortion drugs.
And he should simply choose whichever one he wants to brew.
Zhang Yu is essentially washing his hands of the decision and leaving the fate of the royal bloodline entirely up to the cosmos.
It's the ultimate gamble. So that night, the crown prince dismisses all the servants from the bedchamber. He sets up a small stove.
Right.
He blindly picks one of the unmarked doses and brews it himself over the coals.
He has no idea which one it is.
None. He brings the bowl to Consort Yang, explains the grim political reality they're facing, and forces her to drink it.
Which is just heartbreaking.
She's weeping, heartbroken, but she obeys. They sit in the quiet room and wait for the inevitable.
And then?
And then she falls deeply and perfectly asleep, no pain, no loss. She drank the anti-miscarriage drug.
Wow. You might assume that surviving that kind of gamble would be taken as a sign to stop.
You would think.
But the crown prince is so consumed by his very real fear of Princess Taiping that he refuses to yield.
He can't let it go.
The very next night, he decides he has to try again with the second dose.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
I love this part of text.
So it's the second night. The crown prince is alone again, secretly brewing this second batch of medicine.
The actual abortion drug this time.
Yes. The text notes it's about 90% done. And as he's sitting there watching the pot simmer, he suddenly feels overwhelmingly drowsy.
He nods off right there in his chair.
And he has a profoundly vivid vision. He dreams that the room is suddenly filled with a flashing, brilliant red light.
Okay.
Out of this light steps a majestic god. The text describes him meticulously: a red face, a beautiful long beard, silkworm eyebrows, and phoenix eyes.
Very specific details.
Oh, yeah, and he's towering, standing about 10 feet tall. He's wearing a green embroidered robe and a stunning white jade belt.
Right.
This divine figure walks into the room, slowly circles the small stove where the medicine is brewing, and then vanishes into thin air.
Just disappears.
The crown prince jolts awake, his heart pounding. He looks over at the stove. The medicine pot has been completely overturned. The potion is spilled everywhere, and the charcoal fire has been entirely extinguished.
What's fascinating here is the specific symbolism of that vision.
Break that down for us.
For anyone familiar with the lore, the entity the Crown Prince describes looks exactly like Guan Yu, the legendary historical general who became revered as the Emperor of the Three Realms.
Right. He's not just a random deity.
No, Guan Yu is the ultimate symbol of fierce loyalty, righteousness, and martial protection.
So having the god of loyalty physically manifest to protect the child.
It gives the Crown Prince an undeniable heaven-sent mandate.
So the next day, the crown prince calls Zhang Yu back in and recounts this incredible dream, the red-faced god, the overturned pot.
And Zhang Yu seizes the moment brilliantly.
He falls to his knees and congratulates the prince.
He frames this supernatural event to convince the Crown Prince that this unborn child clearly has divine protection.
He points out that the prince tried to leave it to fate, and fate protected the child.
And then he tried to force it himself, and the gods physically intervened to stop the fire.
The heavens have spoken.
It's a masterclass in persuasion. Zhang Yu reframes the survival of the child. It is no longer a political liability that Princess Taiping can exploit.
It's a destiny that the crown prince is obligated to protect.
And it works. The Crown Prince finally abandoned his plan to terminate the pregnancy.
But they still have to navigate the reality of keeping it a secret from Princess Taiping's spies.
Right, the danger isn't gone.
So Zhang Yu goes above and beyond his duties as a royal lecturer to satisfy Consort Yang's pregnancy cravings without arousing suspicion from the palace kitchens.
This is wild.
He secretly smuggles green plums and papayas into the palace, hidden deep inside his own robes during his lectures.
Just incredible dedication.
He personally ensures the physical and nutritional safety of this pregnancy.
And history ultimately validates their dangerous efforts.
It does.
The political tides turn. Princess Taiping's relentless plots are eventually exposed, and she is executed for treason.
The palace stabilizes, the threat is removed, and that baby is safely born.
And that baby, who survived poison and palace espionage, grew up to be Emperor Suzong.
So that unborn baby, saved by a dream and a doctor's gamble, is now the man sitting on the throne.
Full circle.
Which brings us right back to the executioner's block in Shang. Emperor Suzong owes his literal existence, his very breath, to the bravery, the deception, and the intense loyalty of Zhang Yu.
But Zhang Yu has passed away.
And now Zhang Yu's two sons are standing before Suzong, facing the executioner's blade for committing treason against the empire.
This is where the philosophical framework we discussed earlier crashes into raw human emotion.
Right.
On a personal level, Suzong feels an agonizing obligation. I mean, how can he slaughter the children of the man who saved his life?
The man who smuggled plums in his robes to keep his mother healthy.
Exactly. He feels a profound need to spare them to repay this infinite personal debt. But he also knows the political reality of the newly restored state.
He is the ruling emperor, but his father, Shang Huang, is still alive as the retired emperor.
So seeking a way out, Suzong writes a desperate plea to his father, asking for permission to bend the state law just this once.
To grant a special pardon to these two men purely in the name of gratitude. But doesn't strict adherence to the law in this case make the emperor look ungrateful to his subjects?
That's the counter-argument, definitely.
If you don't reward the family of the man who saved the royal bloodline, why should anyone else ever risk their neck for the emperor in the future?
It's a very valid point.
You would think Shang Huang, the man who actually lived through that terror,
The one who had the dream?
the man who actually saw the red-faced god and the overturned pot,
Yeah.
you would think he'd understand that logic. You'd think he'd say, yes, we owe their father everything. Let the sons live.
You would think so, but that is not what happens.
It's brutal.
Shang Huang's written response is stunning in its cold, unyielding adherence to the rule of law. It's a breathtaking rejection of personal sentiment.
What did he say?
He writes back to his son, the emperor, and he invokes that exact philosophy of filial piety and state loyalty we talked about.
Ah, here it is.
Shang Huang argues that because Zhang Jun and Zhang Tuzi lost their minds and followed the rebels, they are inherently traitors to the court.
Right.
And therefore, by the laws of nature and the state, they are the unfilial, rebellious sons of the great Zheng Yu.
He is completely divorcing the sons from the father's legacy.
Yes.
He's saying, by being bad subjects to the state, they are bad sons to Zhang Yu, so the royal family owes them nothing on their father's behalf.
Exactly that. He uses the philosophy to sever the emotional debt, and then Shang Huang delivers the final crushing blow.
Okay.
He writes, I am old and I do not want to hear more of court politics, but punishing rebellion is the weight of the nation's law.
Wow.
He continues, since you come to ask my command, it is hard to bend the law for personal feelings. You should proceed according to what the law officials have proposed.
The man who was saved by their father refuses to save them.
Yes.
The sons of the savior must be executed purely according to the legal code. There is no magical pardon.
The law acts as a machine, and once it is turned on, it cannot be stopped by memories or gratitude.
But to really grasp the stakes here, you have to picture the historical context. Imagine an empire completely fractured by the Anlushan rebellion.
Right.
The retired emperor, Shang Huang, has been forced to flee his capital just to save his own life.
It's the total collapse of security.
Exactly. And in an environment like that, the imperial court is shattered, and trust isn't just a rare commodity, it is virtually non-existent.
Okay, because you have an emperor on the run, fleeing toward a place called Shanyang, and the imperial entourage is just trying to figure out who is actually going to show up to support them.
Yeah, they have no idea who is still on their side.
Right. And this leads to this incredibly tense guessing game on the road. The retired emperor is traveling with his trusted eunuch, Gao Lishi, and he asks him a very blunt question.
He essentially says, out of all our officials, who do you think is going to follow us into exile? And who is going to defect to the rebels?
Which is such a heavy question when your life is on the line.
It's a profound psychological moment. I mean, the empire is burning, and they are passing the time by placing bets on loyalty.
And Galishi uses what seems to be, completely sound, pragmatic logic to make his guesses.
He does. He looks at a minister named Fang Guan. Now, Fang Guan was a capable administrator, but he had never been heavily utilized or favored by the royal court.
He was just kind of a standard official.
Right. And furthermore, the rebel leader himself, and Lushan, had actually recommended Fang Guan for promotion in the past.
Oh, wow. So there's a connection there.
A strong one. So Gao Lishi concludes that Fang Guan has absolutely no reason to risk his life for a fleeing emperor.
It makes total sense. So if Fang Guan was the unlikely candidate, who was the sure bet?
Well, Gao Lishi looks the other end of the spectrum and points to the Zhang brothers.
Okay, Zhang Jun and Zhang Ji.
Exactly. You have Zhang Jun, a high-ranking minister, and Zhang Ji, who is actually a royal son-in-law.
So they are basically family.
They are deeply entrenched. These two had received unprecedented royal favor, wealth, status, access to the inner circle.
So Gao Lishi predicts with total confidence that the Zhang brothers will be the first to arrive and demonstrate their loyalty.
He's absolutely certain of it.
But the retired emperor just listens, gives a faint smile, and says, "Hard to say."
Yeah, hard to say. That is the voice of a ruler who has survived decades of palace politics.
He's seen it all.
He knows that logic, gratitude, and familial ties often just evaporate the moment real mortal danger appears.
And his cynicism is entirely validated by what happens next, because the twist is spectacular.
It really is.
The person who comes rushing to the emperor's side is Fang Guan.
The guy with the rebel connections.
Exactly. The official who supposedly had every logical reason to defect to the rebels stays entirely loyal.
While the highly favored Zhang brothers hesitate.
They don't just hesitate. The text notes that they harbored hidden treasonous agendas. They're essentially waiting to see which way the political winds would blow before committing.
Hedging their bets.
Right. And Gao Lishi is absolutely stunned that the people showered with grace turned their backs, while the overlooked minister stepped up.
What's fascinating here is the clash of values that happens next once the rebellion starts to be quelled.
Right, because the current emperor gets involved.
Yes, Emperor Suzong, who is the son of the retired emperor, he comes to his father to beg for a pardon for these treasonous Zhang brothers.
Why would he do that?
Because his reasoning is entirely based on a sense of personal political debt. Suzong feels he owes his own past success and elevation to the throne, to the Zhang brothers' father.
The late Duke of Yan, Zhang Yu.
Exactly. So you have a newly minted emperor acting out of gratitude and a desire to repay a political favor.
But the retired emperor is operating on a totally different wavelength.
Completely different. He is acting out of cold, absolute state security.
The retired emperor is furious with his son's request. He explicitly states that the Zhang brothers are greedy and devoid of righteousness.
But Suzong keeps pushing. He argues that he cannot bear to let the law execute the sons of the man who helped him secure his own position.
The tension between father and son over this execution is palpable.
It really is. It threatens to cause a major rift.
But finally, Consort Mei steps in to mediate the dispute.
And she makes a very smart argument.
She points out the tragic optics of wiping out the Duke of Yan's bloodline entirely, especially since one of the brothers, Zhang Ji, is technically a royal son-in-law.
It is a pragmatic intervention. It allows the retired emperor to show a margin of leniency to his son without compromising the integrity of his rule.
So they reach a compromise.
Right. The son-in-law, Zhang Ji, is spared the death penalty but gets exiled to Lingnan.
Which at the time was not a pleasant place to go.
Oh, not at all. It was considered a harsh, disease-ridden frontier at the edge of the empire. It was essentially a death sentence by geography.
But for the other brother, Zhang Jun, the retired emperor refuses to budge.
Because Zhang Jin didn't just hesitate, he actively helped the rebels search the royal palace.
He crossed a major line.
He participated in the destruction of the imperial house itself. Therefore, Zhang Jun is executed.
As a quick, fascinating side note from the source, there is another official named Daxi's son who is executed alongside him.
Yeah, that's a really interesting detail.
But Daxi's son's family is specifically spared from having their property confiscated.
And the reason goes back years.
Right. Years earlier, when the rebel leader was pretending to be loyal and offered to send horses to the capital, Daxison secretly submitted a memorial to the court.
An official written warning.
Exactly. He warned them about the suspicious behavior. And the court remembered that one act of hidden loyalty. It is wild how a single piece of paper from years ago ripples forward to save a family from complete ruin.
It perfectly illustrates the ledger of imperial justice. The court records everything, and eventually the accounts are balanced.
Okay, let's unpack this poetic irony mentioned in the text regarding the execution.
The feud with Yao Chang.
Yes, it mentions an old legendary political feud. Years ago, a famous minister named Yao Chang was literally on his deathbed, using his final breaths to scheme against the Zhang brothers' father, Zhang Yu.
Right, trying to take him down even as he was dying.
But now, Zhang Yu is long dead, and all of his past glory, all the political capital he built up over a lifetime, cannot save his own son from the executioner's block.
The source explicitly highlights that the father survived his greatest enemies, but could not protect his descendants from themselves.
Which seamlessly transitions into how the historical record explains the root cause of this family's downfall.
In the minds of the people at the time, the seeds of destruction were not just sown through bad political calculations.
Right.
They were woven into the very foundation of the family's power years earlier.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text hits us with a bizarre flashback regarding the Zhang family mansion.
It's a very specific story.
Years prior, when the father, Zhang Yu, was building his incredibly lavish estate, he brought in a feng shui monk named Fa Hong to assess the grounds.
And the monk praises the layout, claiming it will generate endless wealth.
But he gives them one incredibly strict architectural constraint.
He says whatever you do not dig earth from the northwest corner of the property.
It is a highly specific warning about disrupting the foundational energy of the estate. A warning like that seems impossible to ignore. Does Zhang Yu actually listen to him?
He completely forgets to inform the construction workers.
Oh no.
Yeah. A few days later, the monk returns to check on the progress. And the moment he walks onto the property, he senses a desolate aura.
He can just feel it.
He runs to the northwest corner and discovers that the workers have dug 3 or 4 deep pits into the earth.
Even though Zhang Yu panics and immediately orders the workers to fill the pits back in, the damage is already done.
The monk says, the guest energy is gone.
For those unfamiliar, guest energy in this context refers to the atmospheric vitality that invites external fortune and prosperity into a space.
By rupturing that specific corner, they effectively drained the vessel.
And the monk makes a chilling prophecy. He states that Zhang Yu's wealth will end with him, and his sons will meet a terrible fate in exactly 20 years.
And if you trace the timeline in the text, that 20-year mark aligns perfectly with Zhang Jun kneeling in the execution square.
It's almost too perfect.
The source provides a poem to explain the true meaning. It says, "Calamity isn't just from digging dirt. No need to obsess over feng shui if your heart is upright."
That reframes the entire story.
It is vital for understanding the worldview of the era. They believed deeply that environmental harmony and moral uprightness were fundamentally intertwined.
So the pits dug in the dirt were not a magical curse.
No, they were a physical manifestation of a fatal flaw already present in the Zhang family's character.
It represented carelessness, arrogance, and a severe lack of attention to their foundations.
The ruined landscape was simply a reflection of their doomed moral trajectory.
We just saw how moral decay doomed the Zhang brothers. But that same disconnect from reality was happening at the very top of the empire.
Specifically with Empress Zhang.
Yes. The text paints her as incredibly cunning, heavily involved in palace politics, and far from virtuous.
She was a major player behind the scenes.
And there is a highly memorable, almost cinematic detail about her behavior during the war.
The gambling incident.
Yes. She is embedded with the army alongside Emperor Suzong. You have troops outside fighting for their lives in the mud, trying to save the dynasty from complete collapse.
And inside the royal tent, she and the emperor want to gamble.
They want to play dice, but they are fully aware of how it would look to the soldiers outside.
So to keep it a secret, she actually takes the time to carve gambling dice out of wood so they won't make a sound when they hit the board.
It's like secretly playing games on a muted phone during a critical board meeting, but with literal life and death stakes.
You have troops dying outside, and inside the tent, the leadership is literally muting their dice so they can keep playing games.
The absurdity of that image really highlights a profound disconnect from the crisis surrounding them.
It captures her total reliance on secrecy and hidden maneuvers. And that reliance extends deeply into her political strategy.
She aligns herself with powerful palace eunuchs, specifically Li Fuguo and Yu Chaowen.
This shadow alliance leads directly to one of the most disastrous military decisions documented in the text.
The emperor gathers 9 legendary generals to go crush the remaining rebel forces. These are battle-hardened veterans who essentially rebuilt the empire.
But instead of letting them command, the emperor puts the eunuch Yu Chaowen in charge of all of them as the army inspector.
Why would the emperor put someone who only knows palace politics in charge of a massive military operation?
It boils down to a profound paranoia regarding military power. The emperor feared that if these 9 brilliant generals united and succeeded, they might turn their massive armies against him.
So he sabotages his own military structure.
He sends a political operative to oversee them, effectively keeping the command structure fractured and dependent on the throne.
It is a nightmare scenario of micromanagement.
And the result is a total disaster.
During a major battle, an unnatural, massive daytime windstorm kicks up. The sky goes dark.
Because the command structure is compromised and the generals cannot act independently, the entire army falls into panic and routs.
The emperor naturally panics and blames the generals for the humiliation.
Of course he does.
He ends up recalling the ultimate hero of the era, the legendary general Guozi, and replaces him with another commander.
When Guozi is recalled, the text describes an incredibly emotional scene.
Everyday citizens are literally weeping in the streets. They are throwing themselves into the road, blocking his path, begging him not to leave them unprotected.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it offers a masterclass in recognizing the true source of failure.
Because the retired emperor sees right through it.
Yes. When the retired emperor of the Shangwang hears about this defeat, he actually defends the generals to his son.
He points out that these men, especially Guozi, have massive past merits.
And he correctly identifies that the defeat was not due to a lack of tactical skill. It was entirely because they did not have independent command.
The micromanagement from the palace caused the failure, not the generals.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the most incredible part.
The contrast with Guozi.
Yes. We just discussed the Zhang family getting wiped out because they thought their royal connections made them untouchable. But then we have Guozi,
who eventually helps crush the rebellion.
He is named the Prince of Fenyang. He becomes wildly successful. And historically, being a wildly successful general with a massive army is the most dangerous job in the world.
Because emperors tend to execute generals they fear.
Exactly. How did he survive when so many others are executed for being too powerful?
He survived by understanding exactly what the emperor feared most and neutralizing that fear instantly.
The emperor tested him, right?
He did. He tested him by sending a single piece of paper recalling him from the front lines.
Just a piece of paper.
Most generals in that position would hesitate. They would gather their loyal troops for protection before returning to the capital, terrified of being executed without their army around them.
But Guozi took a completely different approach.
The text says he did not hesitate for a single second.
The exact day the order arrived, he packed up, left his heavily armed troops behind, and traveled light, heading straight back to the capital alone.
He demonstrated absolute radical obedience.
He essentially signaled to the emperor, I possess all this power, but I have zero ambition to use it against you.
He neutralized the paranoia through compliance. And he carried that same strategy of diffusing tension into his personal life.
Which leads to a rather remarkable domestic dispute detailed in the source.
It's quite a story.
Guozi's son, Guo Ai, marries the emperor's daughter, the princess.
A huge honor, but very complicated.
Very. During a fierce argument between the young couple, the son loses his temper and yells at the princess, "Do you think you are special just because your father is the emperor? My father could be emperor if he wanted to. He just doesn't even want the job."
I cannot imagine the sheer panic Guozi must have felt when he heard that.
It is, technically speaking, high treason.
The princess is furious, marches straight to the palace, and reports the statement to her father, the emperor.
And Guozi does not wait for the royal guards to show up at his door.
No, he takes immediate action.
He immediately detains his own son, locks him up, and waits for the emperor to hand down the punishment.
He is offering his son up to prove that he does not endorse this treasonous outburst.
But the emperor's response is brilliant and surprisingly human.
He knows Guozi is completely loyal, and he recognizes that the son is just a foolish kid speaking out of anger in a marital dispute.
The emperor says to Guozi, "If you aren't deaf and dumb, you can't be a father-in-law." Don't mind the bedroom quarrels of children.
He refuses to punish them.
If you aren't deaf and dumb, you can't be a father-in-law. Sometimes you just have to pretend you didn't hear the crazy things your kids say.
It demonstrates a level of trust between a sovereign and a military commander that is practically unheard of in imperial history.
And Guozi intentionally cultivated that trust every single day of his life.
So what does this all mean for his legacy?
The text details his retirement strategy, and it is fascinating. He doesn't go hide in a monastery to prove he is harmless.
He does the exact opposite.
He amasses mountain-like wealth. He has 7 sons and 8 sons-in-law, all holding high office. He lives to the incredibly ripe old age of 85, passing away peacefully.
He enjoys lavish entertainment, music, and absolute luxury.
But he is only permitted to enjoy that luxury because of his secret weapon.
The text reveals that during his retirement, Wozi left his inner bedroom doors completely open.
His former subordinates, officials, and servants could simply wander in and out of his private living quarters at any time.
He intentionally lived with zero privacy.
He did it deliberately to prove he had absolutely nothing to hide.
You cannot accuse a man of plotting a secret rebellion in the shadows when he refuses to even close his bedroom door.
He weaponized transparency as a defensive strategy.
The text quotes the Tang history to summarize his life, and it is honestly the ultimate historical compliment.
It states that he held the empire's safety in his hands for 30 years without the ruler ever suspecting him.
He held extreme pinnacle power without the masses envying him.
And he lived in total luxury without people criticizing him. He is the historical pinnacle of a life fully, safely, and richly lived. Okay, let's shift scenes.
Yeah, we are looking at a highly poignant moment in the royal court, featuring the retired Emperor Xuanzong and his once highly favored but ultimately sidelined Consort May.
The material is just incredible. You have this retired emperor reflecting on his past glories and the massive tragedies that defined his reign.
He's essentially surrounded by the ghosts of his own decisions.
Right, and right in the center of this historical storm is Consort May. She's a woman trying to navigate her mortality and her legacy in a palace that has essentially already moved on without her.
Which is a terrifying position to be in.
Okay, let's unpack this. The text starts with the retired emperor having a sudden moment of realization about the legendary poet Li Bai.
Now, if you are familiar with Chinese history, you probably know Li Bai as the ultimate scholar, a master of words.
Maybe a bit of a romantic wanderer, too.
Exactly, but the emperor notes something much more pragmatic here.
Right, he realizes that the great military general Guozi, the man who built this massive empire-saving legacy, he would not have even survived his early days if Li Bai hadn't recognized his heroism.
That's the crazy part. Li Bai wasn't just sitting around writing pretty texts. He had an unparalleled eye for true heroes.
He saw the spark in Guozi that literally everyone else missed. And by doing so, he effectively saved the future general's life.
It completely reframes how we view historical artists, I think. The emperor is acknowledging that poetry and political vision aren't mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Li Bai's ability to read people, to understand the core essence of a hero before they had proven themselves on the battlefield, that was as crucial to the survival of the empire as any sword or cavalry unit.
But this realization is layered with an immediate bitter irony. It is a crushing missed connection.
Oh, absolutely devastating.
According to your notes, Li Bai had been exiled to Yilang, and this was because he got caught up in a messy succession dispute known as the Prince of Yang affair. Right, so the emperor, feeling this newfound appreciation for the poet's strategic mind, issues a special pardon. He wants to bring Li Bai back to court to finally employ his immense talents in a practical way.
But the timing.
The timing is terrible. Almost the moment the pardon is issued, news arrives that Li Bai has already passed away.
And that misconnection ripples out through the entire court, specifically reaching Consort May.
She hears the news of Li Bai's death and starts reminiscing with the powerful eunuch Gao Lishi.
Her mind immediately goes to a very specific, lingering regret she has regarding the poet.
Yeah, she tells Gao Lishi that years ago she had wanted to spend 1,000 gold pieces to commission a poem from Li Bai.
1,000 gold pieces just for a poem.
Right, because she was inspired by the ancient empress at Changmen Palace. To give you some context, that ancient empress famously used a brilliant writer named Sima Shangru to write a piece of literature so moving that it actually won back the emperor's favor.
And Consort May thought she could pull off the exact same maneuver?
Exactly. It's essentially the 8th century equivalent of paying an elite PR firm $1 million to fix your reputation.
Hoping it will save your job.
Right. She thought she could just buy the perfect words to fix her life.
What's fascinating here is the brutal, almost surgical honesty with which Gao Lixi responds.
He does not hold back.
Not at all. He is the ultimate pragmatic political operator. And he shuts down her romanticizing of the past without missing a single beat. He reminds her of two harsh truths.
First being just the simple logistics, right? Levi wasn't even in the capital at the time she wanted to hire him.
Exactly. But second, and far more importantly, he explains the hard limitations of art when it comes face to face with entrenched power.
Gao Lixi basically forces her to realize that the emperor's favor toward her fierce rival, the famous Consort Yang, was structurally immovable.
He tells her, Your Highness, no amount of beautiful language was going to change your fate.
He even points out that Consort Mei did eventually write her own famous poem, the Laodong, or East Tower poem.
Which was celebrated. It was brilliant.
But it completely failed to shift the political reality of the emperor's affections.
You might recognize this feeling from your own career or personal life. We often fall into the trap of thinking that the perfectly crafted email, the flawless presentation, or the grand romantic gesture can fix a fundamentally broken dynamic.
We desperately want to believe that eloquence conquers all.
But Gao Lixi is telling Consort Mei, and by extension you, the listener, that sometimes structural power dynamics simply cannot be moved by poetry.
Art has a ceiling when it crashes into the concrete wall of human obsession and political alliances.
That is exactly right.
And that brings us to where the narrative shifts gears entirely. We move from the pragmatic limits of art into something decidedly mystical.
The magical object.
Yes. The text introduces an item that completely alters the tone of the excerpt. Word arrives at the palace that ordinary plum blossoms have been sent as a tribute from the southern Jiangyin region.
And everyone in the court is excited.
Everyone except Consort Mei. She is completely unimpressed, because she possesses what the text calls an immortal plum branch.
And within the reality of the story, this isn't just a metaphor for a nice plant. This is a genuinely supernatural item.
The text describes how ever since she acquired this fairy plum branch, she looks at all earthly flowers as totally mundane.
It defies the laws of nature. It blooms beautifully and continuously through all 4 seasons.
Ignoring the harsh winters entirely.
Even more incredibly, instead of decaying over time, it actually grows more fragrant. Its colors become even more vibrant and pure as the years pass.
She carries it everywhere. It is her ultimate solace in a palace that has cast her aside. It is the physical manifestation of perfection in a world that is deeply flawed.
But then the turning point arrives.
Yeah, one morning, Consort Mei wakes up and notices something is terribly wrong. She goes to move the branch, and that fragrance, the scent that was supposed to grow stronger forever, has suddenly faded.
The brilliant color looks haggard and withered.
And as she touches it, the petals begin to drift down, falling away.
The psychological impact of this moment on Consort Mei is immediate. She isn't just sad about a dying plant.
Right. She instantly recalls a prophecy given to her years ago by an immortal master.
The prophecy stated explicitly that her own life would end the moment this immortal flower faded.
The decay of the branch is literally the ticking clock of her own mortality.
And her reaction to this is striking. She doesn't panic. She doesn't scream for help.
She immediately falls physically ill and becomes completely bedridden. The royal doctors rush into her chambers, checking her pulse, trying to prescribe all sorts of rare treatments.
But she flatly refuses all medicine.
She tells them that her destiny has reached its absolute end and no earthly medicine can reverse the fundamental decrees of fate.
She accepts it with zero resistance.
Mm.
It is a remarkable display of agency through surrender.
Absolutely.
Think about the environment she's in. In a royal palace where everyone is constantly fighting tooth and nail for one more inch of power, one more day of favor, she sees the falling petals and simply says, "It is time."
Here's where it gets really interesting. The retired emperor, the man who sidelined her for another woman but still clearly holds affection for her, comes to visit her sickbed.
He sits by her, holding her hand.
Trying to be the pragmatic voice of reason, he urges her to just take the medicine, treating the situation like she just has a bad cold and needs to build her strength.
But she refuses him too.
And instead of talking about getting better, she makes a highly specific, very strange request about what to do with the immortal plum branch after she dies.
She tells the emperor that the branch must under no circumstances be buried with her.
Because to bury it in the dirt would profane something of such pure origin.
Right. But she also insists it cannot be planted because a magical item like this cannot survive in the mundane human world without her presence to anchor it.
So she asks for a very specific ritual. The branch must be burned in a Buddhist incense burner.
The emperor is understandably shaken by all of this. He asks her how she can be so calm in the face of death.
And how she can be so sure she is going to a good place after she passes.
This is when Consort May recounts a vivid symbolic dream she had. She tells him that in her dream she saw immortal Wei floating in the clouds.
The imagery highlight in this dream sequence is absolutely stunning.
It really is. Immortal Wei is holding a white parrot.
And the immortal explains that this white parrot, through a combination of good karma and destined connections, had transcended from his chaotic life in the royal palace
Moved on to a pure Buddhist land.
And finally ascended to the immortal realm.
The message Immortal Wei delivers to Consort May through this vision is crystal clear. She tells May that she has lived 2 lifetimes trapped within the suffocating walls of the royal palace, but that she must remember her true original nature.
Her real home isn't the earthly court. It is the Ruizu Palace, or the Palace of the Stamen Pearl, located in the immortal realm.
The immortal explicitly warns her not to linger or hold on to the mortal world because her time in the palace was just a temporary exile.
It's time to go back to where she truly belongs.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what we are seeing is an intricate synthesis of religious philosophies.
How so?
To put it simply, think of it this way. Buddhism gave her the idea that her soul could move to a better place through karma and past lives. Taoism gave her the exact address and architectural blueprint of that place, the Ruizu Palace.
Wow. Combined, they gave her the ultimate psychological escape hatch.
Exactly. For the people living in the high-stress, dangerous environment of the royal court, this mystical worldview served as a profound coping mechanism. It was a way to process the constant uncertainty and the fragile nature of power.
Because if your earthly life is a nightmare of shifting political alliances, the belief that your true home is a palace of pearl in the clouds gives you an impenetrable psychological armor.
And that armor is fully on display in her final moments.
Yeah, after telling the emperor this dream, she turns to him, this man who ruled the known world, and actually comforts him. She tells him not to let his grief over her harm his own health.
Then in a moment that feels almost cinematic, she suddenly sits up in bed, waves her hand at the empty air, and declares the immortals are, "Here I'm going."
And with that, she simply closes her eyes and passes away.
She doesn't fade away in fear. She steps into the next world like she's walking through an open door that only she can see.
But the people left behind in the earthly realm still have to deal with the messy reality of grief.
Which brings us to the emperor's reaction.
The retired emperor is devastated. He breaks down crying, calling their bond a second life marriage.
He ensures she is buried with the absolute highest honors.
Elevating her status to a precious consort, or goifei, for the funeral. He orders entire groves of plum trees to be planted around her tomb.
But the most moving part is the emotional eulogy he writes for her himself.
The eulogy is a masterpiece of mourning, relying heavily on the elements of the natural world that she loved so much.
He writes with such deliberate specificity, trying to immortalize her through text.
The comparisons in the note are striking. He writes that her face was like fresh flowers, and her virtue was like warm jade.
Beautiful imagery.
He says his memory of her is like stringing together precious pearls, and her loyalty to him, even during the years when she was ignored, was like steadfast stone.
And finally, he compares her departure from the world to falling plum rains scattering and drifting away.
It is the emperor using his own art to try and capture something that has already slipped through his fingers.
But even as he writes these beautiful words, he honors her final mystical request, the cremation of the immortal plum branch.
They take the withered branch and place it into the Buddhist incense furnace. And miraculously, the moment it touches the fire, it doesn't just burn to ash.
It emits this overwhelming, powerful fragrance that fills the entire courtyard.
Instead of normal smoke, it produces 10,000 sparks that look exactly like perfectly formed plum blossoms.
These glowing floral sparks fly up into the clouds like a shower of magical fireworks disappearing into the sky.
It is the ultimate visual confirmation of her dream.
The fairy seed doesn't stay in the human world. It returns to the immortal realm. The text even includes a classic elegy referred to as the fire text, which was traditionally read during this kind of ritual.
The fire text adds another layer of depth. It mourns the branch as if it were a person calling it a hermit.
It references famous cultural touchstones like Luofu, the mythical beauty associated with plum blossoms.
And the Yu Ridge, a geographical mountain pass, famous for its wild plums.
It praises the branch for having an iron and stone heart, meaning it possessed an unbreakable, pure nature amidst the freezing cold.
And it concludes beautifully by stating that the branch's fragrant soul
wasn't destroyed by the fire. Instead, it now resides forever in the lonely mountains, water, and moon.
It is a moment of pure transcendent closure. The art, the magic, the grief, it all resolves in this beautiful image of sparks flying into the clouds, proving that her spirit remained untouchable.
But the source material doesn't let us stay in the clouds for long.
No, it really doesn't.
This pivot in the text will give you whiplash. We go straight from this transcendent magical funeral back down into the dirty reality of court politics.
While the current Emperor Suzong and other palace consorts come to pay their formal respects and mourn Consort Mei, there is one glaring absence.
Empress Zheng. She fakes an illness specifically to avoid showing up to the funeral.
It is a blatant, calculated sign of disrespect.
And the retired emperor sees right through the fake illness. He is furious at Empress Zhang's arrogance.
This was a funeral he personally commanded honoring a woman he loved. For the Empress to boycott it is a direct insult to his authority.
But before he can unleash his anger, the eunuch Gao Lishi, the exact same man who gave Consort Mei that brutal reality check about poetry earlier, steps in with another reality check.
This time for the retired emperor.
Which sets up the tension perfectly.
This raises an important question. Why doesn't the former ruler of the empire just punish the empress for her insubordination?
Well, Gao Lishi pulls him aside with a secretive warning.
He reveals that behind the scenes, Empress Zhang has formed a hardline alliance with the incredibly powerful eunuch Li Fugo.
Li Fugo isn't just a palace administrator. He controls the military. He holds the actual physical monopoly on violence in the capital.
Gao Lishi explains that because of this alliance, even the current reigning emperor has to tolerate their insubordination.
The power dynamic has fundamentally shifted away from the throne and into the hands of the military commanders.
This is where the mechanics of power strip away all the poetry. Gao Lishi explicitly advises the retired emperor that speaking up or trying to punish the empress will do absolutely no good.
In fact, it will only put a target on his own back.
The result is humiliating. The retired emperor is forced into a brooding silence. He swallows his anger and does nothing.
The text encapsulates this perfectly with a concluding poem that says, "A wicked wife and evil servant are an incurable disease. Even with a bitter pill, it might do more harm than good to try and cure it."